Hi, listeners. We want to tell you about a podcast we're really digging. It's called Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Radio. Every week, they travel the world to find the most fascinating stories about food, including children who harvest cod tongues after school in Norway and a detective who tracks down food thieves. And on Milk Street Radio, you can always find the unexpected. The comedian who ranks apples using an elaborate 100-point system, the secret history of grocery stores, and how to eat your way through Italy. They also interview the most beloved names in food like Jacques Pepin, Sola El-Waylly, Jose Andres, Jet Tila, Ina Garten, Nigella Lawson, and Padma Lakshmi. Plus, co-hosts Christopher Kimball and Sarah Moulton do live calls with listeners and answer their questions about ingredients, techniques, and culinary mysteries. Like, why roasting a leg of lamb made one caller's oven explode? Ever wonder why your bread won't rise or your souffle falls flat? Chris and Sarah have the answers. You'll also hear from a rotating cast of contributors, including Kenji Lopez-Alt, Cheryl Day, Dan Pashman from The Sporkful, and Alex Ainuz, a French guy cooking from YouTube. Take a listen at 177milkstreet.com/radio or just search your podcast app for Milk Street Radio. You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
Westholme is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
And welcome to Cutting the Curd on the Heritage Radio Network. I'm your host, Carol Warren. And on today's episode, we have Robyn Metcalfe, the executive producer of a new cheese documentary called Shelf Life, directed by Ian Chaney. And we're super stoked because I don't know many cheese films. So, Robyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so cool. I live in New York, so it's great because there's been a premiere. You just had a world premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival, right? How was that?
Yes, it was great. There were 3 screenings, and our team was in full force on the world premiere, as it's called, the first night. And it was good. We small theaters, but they were packed, and so we were happy.
That's very cool. Did you have cheese plates and a cheese course after the screening?
Funny you mentioned that, because we were actually thinking of doing that. But the more we thought about it, we thought, we really want people to watch the film, and
right.
The cheese could be too good, and the film might, it's just too much competition. So, but we are looking at the possibility of future screenings. In fact, we're sort of promoting this idea that people could screen the film and would have a cheese tasting in connection with it. And in particular, the cheese tasting would be cheeses curated, we hope, by the local cheesemonger in the area, to align a little bit with the characters in the film, because when there is a relationship between the characters in the film and the cheese.
Yeah. Robyn, you were saying you're a historian and you've studied a lot of food, different food politics and things like that. How did you get into cheese? Because I feel like it's not an obvious choice. So how did you get to it?
Oh, I think it's obvious. Cheese is delightful. I mean, we all should be looking for excuses to write about cheese, actually. Some of the other topics aren't quite, I think, as luscious and wonderful. But more than politics, particularly, I've been really drawn to just how food moves around, like logistics, and people who carry it and people who ship it and chop it. And sort of the two of the farm to table has been my focus. And in particular, I finished a book writing about people we don't see in the food system very often. Not the glamorous chefs or the farmers, but people who are making pallets and driving trucks. So the invisible people in the food system. And when I finished the book, I hadn't had time to get around to affineurs, or people who work in caves, and they are very invisible. and unseen, and so essential, as I soon learned as I began to research them. In addition, most of my life I've been a writer, and I was very interested and curious about other ways of telling stories. So that curiosity and the sort of unexplored topic of cheese affineurs came together, and I met Ian Chaney, and we had done 2 films together. So I had a great film partner, and pitched the idea to him that how would it work to explore people who age cheese in caves and develop that into a more visual story. So he was intrigued and trusted this new journey we were going to take, and that's how we began the project.
Wow. That is really cool. And then how did you get to choosing who you got to meet in the cheese universe? Because it was amazing to see how you traveled the world, and you met everyone from like rural countryside, Georgian people, Japan, to a cheesemonger in Chicago. And I do know a few of these people, but I'm amazed that from I want to say as an outsider, your research brought you to some really amazing folks. How were you able to narrow it down?
Well, that's tough. We have a very, very cool team of researchers and producers who have a lot of imagination and curiosity. And so we're able to, ask questions of maybe the people you'd expect to talk to in the cheese world, and have them imagine people and characters that they knew that aren't normally covered, that aren't normally in the limelight. Yeah. I mean, it's a very tricky path to navigate, because most people that we interviewed really wanted to talk specifically about their cheese. I mean, that most people who would be interviewing them would want to hear about the cheese. And while we're very interested in the cheese that they made, we were much more interested in thoughts they had about themselves as cheesemakers, their lives, what questions came to mind. And our team is so good at developing questions. I mean, this whole film is unscripted, so we spend a long time with our characters, giving them plenty of space to, speak more broadly about their life as a cheesemaker, in addition to the cheese.
Right. Yeah. And that was like one of the cool points of it. Like, I went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be a film about affineurs and aging and like a very technical aspect of cheese. But then as I was watching it, I realized, oh, no, wait, this is more of a philosophical look into cheese and like sensory and like life and death moments and like something so much bigger that I personally never thought about. But I was amazed at the parallels that came across in the film. I mean, were you surprised by this at all? I mean, maybe you weren't, but I was actually.
Well, I forgot to mention in this sort of why make this film, this other detail, which is coinciding with the other reasons I explained and shared with you. I was also encountering what it means to get older as a human. So entering my 70s, I was sort of taken aback, I would say, by the conversations with, say, an annual physical, where the current narrative is more about what you can't do or shouldn't do, or how your decline is inevitable. And it struck me, in contrast to cheese that gets better over time, that the question was, what can we learn from aging cheese that could possibly transform the conversations we're currently having about aging as humans, and just push on that a little bit.
Yeah. And it was so great to see like how Mary Quick went into it. And I mean, do you have like a favorite moment that you can recall to the listeners that really epitomizes this thesis? Because I mean, every person had moments, but I feel like there might be one that is outstanding to you.
what I loved about the film was that there were many moments, and they happened as we were interviewing characters such as Mary Quick, where in their answering some questions, they discovered something about themselves they hadn't actually seen before. In other words, they began to connect some dots between human aging and cheese aging. And I love that sort of discovery that you can't plan, you can't create, but that your characters in answering your question hear themselves, take themselves to a different place in the topic. So I think one of the things that Mary said, and a few other characters touched on this, is sort of when do we reach our peak as humans? And I think Mary and a few others suggested that you can reach multiple peaks as humans, that there isn't one single. You have to be open to the fact that if you feel you've peaked, that possibly that might happen again to you, which opens up a lot of possibilities. And in the cheese world, you are exploring whether a cheese has its moment and then, it's over. And I think one of the things we learned is that cheese, as defined by maybe the experts in the competitions, may have a peak that's defined by more or less industry standards, but that, because we're all humans with different abilities to taste food, that perhaps there were, a cheese that might have a different age, might be at its peak for one individual and not at its peak for another individual. So that there's a lot of freedom there.
Yeah. And I love that there's like stages of life. I thought I love that there was that story arc about how the cheeses exist and that as the whole aging. I mean, even the woman in Georgia where she's like, I just want to do things slowly.
Right.
Was so sweet and kind and just very real,
I really like the way she also resisted this, the question, what have you learned from cheese and how has it changed your life? And he basically said, it hasn't.
Right.
which was a nice moment to kind of a fresh, breath of fresh air from getting too maudlin or too poetic or too poetic about saying things.
Like a romantic. I also really like the point, and I never thought about this before either, but she was talking about how she used to milk the cows faster and how they've even changed. They're more welcoming to her rhythm as an older woman. And I thought that was very interesting.
Right.
Like I never thought about that before, it's like, what a cool perspective to see and to travel and to see all these different types of people, because you had like the rural Georgia woman making cheese, mother of cheese, I think she was labeled as. And then you go to Jasper Hill, who is also an artisan cheesemaker, but is way more science focused and technical and very sensory observant in the science view. How did you find that? Like for you, was that like, jarring isn't the right word, but the juxtaposition, what did you think of that?
Yeah, well, there's many ways to look at cheese, right? I mean, or to define it or to understand it. And some people are understanding it through their senses. Mm-hmm. And then other people, especially with all the technology we have, including that wonderful robot that's in the air, they're flipping those cheeses, that push against sort of the humanness of making cheese. And there you can take it apart and understand it in terms of numbers and acid and pH and all of that other business. And we do have a scientist talking about that and showing all the microbes.
Oh, yes.
But, it kind of does push you to consider, is it really a number? Or is it more a feeling? And Ian and I like making movies where we don't give the answer. We really just want to provoke questions where you'll go away and think about it.
We don't know.
It's
a serious thinking piece. It definitely got me I was like, again, I went into it thinking this was going to be just like stories about cheese. And then it just came away with so much more. I was truly, truly surprised about this. And then another thing that caught me in the film was Zoe Brickley of Jasper. She talked about sensory memory even, and how, a lot of cheese is a sensory experience. And I mean, I think for people that love cheese and our listeners that love cheese, that is so true. And do you think now that when you're eating a cheese, it really captures a moment in time for you, Robyn? Like when you're eating cheese, do you feel like there's history in your mind coming back?
Oh yeah, I mean definitely. I mean there is especially with smell, but I think also there's some other sensory things there that have to do with the five senses and touch. This whole idea of beauty when you get older that as was pointed out by some of our characters. Wrinkly skin or white hair. So, what is beauty in terms of, a standard of beauty? And also people can look at a cheese like a blue cheese or something with it is, I don't want to give away too much from the film, but, cheese that has bugs in it and have a feeling of disgust and revulsion. So I think there's some interesting conversations there for people who should think about or could think about just what is beauty and just what is that cheese. We explored cheese a lot as its own body because there's many functions that parallel this in cheese. There are microbes in cheese transforming the character of it, and so as we have in our own bodies. And it breathes, it changes shape, it transforms. It has different communities of microbes that live on it that sort of prepare the way for successive generations of microbes in a cheese. So there's a lot of interesting conversations to have about the sort of corollaries of bodies between a wheel of cheese, let's say, and a human body.
That is really cool. Okay, well, I just want to give a quick break to our sponsors on the show. Hey, everyone, you're listening to Cutting the Curd on the Heritage Radio Network, and we'll be right back.
Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. In Northern Australia, there's a different approach to raising high-quality beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and Northern Territory, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme stewards 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by their natural ecosystems. They're led by a belief that if they balance the needs of their cattle with the needs of the environment, both can thrive. Westholme's team of rangelands experts and nature managers use a variety of tools to monitor and respond to the welfare of the environment, like satellites that address grass health and on-the-ground research. Cattle are happier when they have the freedom to forage and explore, so Westholme ensures that they can roam wild, foraging at will for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives. Their cows graze on native grasses like Mitchell grass, which is only found in Australia, along with dozens of other plants, herbs, and seasonal legumes. The result is a high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia and a flavor suited to complement any cuisine. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Cutting the Curd. I'm your host, Kara Warren. Today on the show, we have Robyn Metcalfe of Shelf Life, a new feature documentary film out in the world about the human experience, aging, and how it parallels to cheese and how they're all connected, and philosophically how we can kind of draw these like cool ideas together. One of the things I would like to talk next about is the rinds of cheese. We were sort of diving into it in the early half of the episode where we were talking about wrinkles and things and almost mites. We almost mentioned mites. I know they're still scary to some people, but it's fascinating the work that goes into rinds. Did you find, Robyn, when you were talking to the affineurs, like their emotional connections to it, or just like How would you describe the rind? I feel like the rind business in cheese is half the cheese sometimes, you know?
Really, I wish I knew that before we made the film. We would have spent much more time on rind conversations. But it seems that it's one of those factors that the cheesemakers we met. One of the factors that they addressed in terms of washes and things that you can wrap cheese in and everything. There, I think that the idea of rinds as a corollary to skin might be the closest thing that we would address in the film. But unfortunately, we didn't really get into,
There was some,
gosh, I
though. I
didn't know
saw
there
it with
was so
like the
much to
geotrichum,
rinds.
and I saw it with Susan Sturman.
Oh
She
yeah,
really went into it. Like, yeah, she was
oh yeah,
she was so good
yeah.
at like talking about like that. Actually, because she is been in the business for a tiny bit. She speaks French and English. Obviously she is really a master of many worlds, and so it's. I think it's great that you had her in the film to describe at the World Cheese Award. It's one of the cheese competitions that are overseas,
Right,
and I'm so glad
right.
you guys went there. I'm sure was so. Did you get to travel? Also, were you on location for all of these stories? By the way.
Yeah, about half of them. I wasn't in Egypt, and I didn't go to Japan, but the rest of them I was there. One of the issues of interviewing these characters is, although we wanted to explore aging as humans, we didn't want to push that subject too much. We really wanted to tease it out and not, put people on the spot. Speaking as an older person myself, it's not comfortable for people to ask you a lot about how old you are and what it feels like. It's not, it's not something you relish as a topic, especially in this case when you're talking to these amazing cheesemakers who are full of life and interest and interesting, and to sort of deflect them to a more, shall we say, mundane topic about how do they feel about aging. It's tricky. And, we're grateful that our characters stepped up and talked about it. But I think it's just something people don't appreciate about conversations with people who are older, is that, it's not something that you can sort of approach head on.
Right. But I will say, like, the cultural aspect was there, which because you guys were able to travel around in the world, like Japan, who is, I feel like, has an aging population, but is wise to respect it. It's you
Right.
can see how. I mean, the cheesemaker that you met with her parents, there was a certain sentiment there that I thought came across very well in the film. Again, you're right. I don't want to disclose too much because I feel like then, people need to go see this film, which is actually one of my very big key questions, which is how can people go to see this film? Like, do they have to wait for it to come to a film festival, or what would you advise for that?
Well, we're just in the early days Tribeca had just closed. And so we're working really just within our own team to do the old guerrilla marketing thing. And right now, we were just encouraging people to reach out if they want a screening, for us to work with them to provide a screening. Could be private, it could be at a university, it could be, for a group, and also encourage some sort of cheese tasting experience with it. So we're doing that just right now. We haven't gotten a big distributor or anything. These films are really hard to categorize.
Right.
In terms of how do you approach somebody, a sales person, or someone to really get into really having a big wind-up distribution.
Sure.
But right now in these early days, we're encouraging people to reach out and get a screening.
And if they're interested in a screening, is it that they reach out to Wicked Delicate? How does one? Again, I'm in the cheese business. I only know a tiny bit about the film business.
Right. The best thing to do is to go to. Thanks for asking. is to go to the film's website, which is shelflifefilm.org, and you can fill out or indicate that that you'd like to have a screening.
Okay, that's good, because I feel like what may happen after the show is people will ask me, Kara, I'm interested in seeing this film. And, that's the funny bit. I like for the listeners to know how to access this information, because it's so nice to have it in this medium and to sort of see, like you mentioned, to see all these characters that some of us I know personally, and some of the listeners may know personally. And it's cool to hear their thoughts on everything. I mean, I've never met like Rachel Dunton before, but seeing a microbiologist look at cheese, it's always another take on it. It's like a rainbow of colors and oddities under a microscope that you're just like, holy crap, is that cheese? I guess it is, so are you going to do like a paper or anything else to follow up on the thesis, or is it just going to stay as a film for you?
I think it's just going to stay as a film. I think we're fascinated by the response and the questions and the interest, and I think these projects have sort of a second life, after they see the light of day, and it's very new at that, and we're working on some other film projects, and so we want to give Shelf Life all the love it can get.
Fair enough. And then I heard a rumor, and you can confirm it. Did you win a cinematography award as well for this film? Did it win a Tribeca an award as well?
Yes.
Amazing. Congratulations.
If you don't like cheese, you'll certainly like the images.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. I will say, I don't know if the credit goes to just Ian Chaney, the film's director, but it was really great to see all the textures. And again, if you don't have access to travel the world like the film was able to, it's so cool to see how cheese is done in other places.
Well, Ezra and Ian have been working together for some time, and they're both poets in their own field. And Ezra knows how to frame and how to hold images, and Ian knows how to edit them into these, sort of beautiful visual narratives. So they're a great team, and we're just so excited and delighted that Ezra is being recognized for his cinematography.
Yeah, super, super great. Robyn, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show today. This was so cool. This is the first interview I've ever had about a film related to cheese. So thank you for indulging me and explaining to us all the cool things that went on with this. And, I hope the listeners can also find your books out there. I think there's also a lot of readers that listen to podcasts, and I think it would be so cool to have that overlap, to understand where you're coming from and all this. It's so great. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Kara. It's been fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to, listeners, you heard it before, but you can find the film at
shelflifefilm.org.
And you can follow us at Cutting the Curd and myself at Kara Warren. And please listen and subscribe to Cutting the Curd wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks. Eat more cheese. Cutting the Curd is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.